older you get, the more important money is.
There's definitely a certain level of money that brings happiness.
Believe me, $1 million contract will solve a lot of your psychological problems.
I heard you say in an interview once that you didn't marry Mr. Big, you wanted to be Mr. Big. Do you relate mostly to being Samantha?
We only tell women, you're going to be fulfilled by being married and having a child. If that were true, men would not be out there making money. That's why I'm like, women, get the money.
Don't marry a rich man.
Forget about Mr. Big. Get the money.
Oh, I love it so much.
So that's what Sex and the City is really about. It's not about Carrie and Mr. Big. It's really about the harsh realities of dating and mating rituals, which are still true today and are probably even worse with dating apps. I mean, look at everybody on social media.
Okay. I'm not sure how this is going to come across, Candace, so can you just bear with me in case I put my foot in my mouth? But so Fresh Start is something that I feel quite passionate about. As someone who, in all honesty, really struggles when I am more busy than usual, keeping my health pillars alive. And it's a real shame because in terms of a value for me, like one of my important, most highest values is looking after myself, looking after my body, looking after my mind. And I just find myself so often not having enough time to make delicious meals. Like I desperately want to feed myself nutrients. I know that my body, I want it to be in the best possible shape, like physically, aesthetically, but I find that really hard to do sometimes. I don't like the supermarket. I really just struggle to think of anything to cook. So these are nutritionist approved meals and you have like 20 plus meals to choose from every single week. And Fresh Start have an exclusive offer for anyone listening to this podcast. So if you would like, you can get $168 off. Essentially, you use the code CURVEWEEKLY. It's 50% off your first delivery and then 10% off your second and third. So you can give it a go, try their delicious food and save some money. How good is that? So thank you so much to Fresh Start. And if you want to find out, all the details are in the podcast show notes. Honestly, it's not often that we get an absolute icon on. We get incredible people on this podcast, but like kind of feel a bit, not starstruck. I know that's embarrassing, but honestly, Candace, firstly, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm thrilled to be here. I've been excited about this for a while.
I used to work in media, you know, like whether it's TV or radio. And some of the people I met, most people, like whether it's Katy Perry or Justin Bieber, those sorts of people you would think I would be excited about. I'm much more excited about talking to you.
We mentioned to everyone else in the office that we were interviewing you on the podcast and you should have seen the reaction. Like, I'm surprised they're not all sitting here in the studio, to be honest. Yeah.
We actually said they were welcome to, but they were too embarrassed to fangirl. For anyone who doesn't know, so Candace is the original writer, the original Carrie Bradshaw from Sex and the City. And you've written, you know, so many other incredible books and just been a real pioneer in terms of like rewriting what it means to be a woman and have a career and love and lose and just like reinvent yourself. And probably the most well-known series that you wrote the original for was Sex and the City. But I'd love to hear a bit more of a background of like your story and what actually inspired from your story and kind of like made its way into all of your incredible works.
Well, first of all, I knew that I wanted to be a writer when I was 8. I grew up in the 60s, it was really, really sexist. It was really, you know, specifically about what women could and couldn't do, and very specific about how women were supposed to feel and how women were supposed to think. And I realized pretty early on as a kid that, you know, all of that was wrong. You could earn money, but you couldn't have your own bank account and you couldn't have your own credit card. That didn't happen until 1974. Women were really second-class citizens. You know, as a woman, your only access to the income stream was through a man. So obviously, you know, there were so many rules about men and women and dating and how women were supposed to behave. And you shouldn't have sex before marriage because that would soil you. And of course, as a little girl, I didn't feel any of the things that girls supposedly felt. I didn't feel like my little girlfriends did either. So that always made me feel like I just want to give women a different way to think about themselves and their lives. So that's always been really important to me. And I was determined to try to make a difference in the world. And I was very determined to be a writer. And I came to New York City. I thought I would just write novels, thought I would just write fiction. I had no idea how to be a professional. And then I had to make money. So I started writing for magazines and pretty much writing anything that I could get paid for. As a woman who didn't go to an Ivy League school, the only jobs that you could get as a writer were writing for women's magazines. There was no New York Times. Those publications were for men. I wrote about microwaves,
Stop it.
decorations, pretty much anything that I could get paid for. And I started writing stories that were precursors to Sex and the City. So Sex and the City is not something that I came up with. It's a continuum of all of the work that I've been doing since the early 80s.
Many people probably don't know that the Sex and City phenomenon started from your article in the New York Observer. Can you just talk through how you transitioned from being a writer for that publication and writing on dating to being one of the most influential voices now in dating and independence?
I got the Sex and the City column. The editors had no idea what it should be, but I knew exactly what it should be because I had already been doing it for the last 15 years. So I'd already been writing those stories about dating. It's really about money, power, status, and how all of that affects who we choose as partners. So that's what Sex and the City is really about. It's not about Carrie and Mr. Big. It's really about the harsh realities of dating and mating rituals, which we see are still true today and are probably even worse with dating apps or, magnified with dating apps. The difference is that it was in a publication that had 60 to 70% male readers, and things that are in publications that men read are considered more valuable. So once I started writing for a publication that men read, all of a sudden it's much more important. People started faxing the column to their friends in LA. That's when people really started paying attention.
Even that alone, that means publications are worth more than women's. Even that, I'm like,
Well,
oh,
I think what's fascinating, what you've done, is the idea that you took something that you knew there was gold in, or literally, or money, because the fact that you had 60% male readership is wild when you're talking about your dating life, by the way. Even that in itself is quite fascinating, because I would have assumed it would be mostly female readers.
No, it was men.
Why do you think that is?
First of all, I interviewed a lot of men. A lot of the stories in Sex and the City are like, one of the stories is the modelizers, all these men who date models.
Can I just say that annoys me so much? Just the idea that men date hot women if they have money. I see it everywhere, all through Soho House, all through London, everywhere. There's all these kind of strange looking guys with actual supermodels.
The reality of women having their own money is true to a certain extent, but they are not anywhere near close to men who have money. So men still make all the rules about money. Now there's crypto, which of course is a male thing. They keep changing the rules about money. So it's almost, in a way, impossible for women to keep up. So this tragic reality is that if you're a woman, the best way to be in the 1% is to marry a rich man, not to make your own money.
Sometimes I feel really proud, like we've taken millions of steps forward. Sometimes I feel exhausted, like I'm just so over it. Like, why are we still having the same conversation? Then I have to remind myself how far we've come, and shows like Sex and the City and what you have continued to write throughout your entire career have really reshaped the way that women think about themselves and think about the way that they can date and make money and show up in the world. And I just want to say thank you for that, because I think there's a huge amount of women that watch that and still watch that and go back time and time again on streaming platforms, and the way that you depict all of the different relationships there. It's not just what Carrie and Big represent. It's the idea that female friendship is so, so important. And for some reason, so many media outlets and stories forget about that. There's so much at play when it comes to the money dynamic, and particularly with Big and Carrie. I know you've spoken out before about how it's kind of almost a little bit disappointing that she ends up with Big.
There are a couple of things there. Number one, Sex and the City, my book ended up being a TV series that went on. You know, TV series is very, very different from a book. And a TV series, you want it to go on and on and on. So you have stories that suit the narrative and suit the medium. You know, the Carrie and Mr. Big story is a story that suited a TV series because we're invested in those characters. We want to see what's going to happen.
I think what's perpetuating the same narrative around women needing to marry wealthy men comes from there being a lack of representation of different types of relationships. And I just think it's really interesting that, like, when the purpose of and what you represent as a person is like the idea of independence, and they warped that character a little bit as time went on to be quite, you know, to not be that.
When we watch those series, and there is that undertone of that dynamic constantly in everything we watch.
She desperately wants him, yeah.
Then we start to fall into that behavior or that trap of, okay, well, we want to be like that, rather than if you constantly saw a different power dynamic or a different relationship.
Okay, well, here's the problem for the dynamic you're talking about, all right? Lipstick Jungle was the TV show about independent women in different kinds of marriages.
Did it not go well?
It lasted for 2 seasons.
Damn.
That was a great TV show. But, you know, the reality is that the audience wants these fantasies. If you write books, the note that you get from the editors who are women is that there has to be some kind of romantic interest, and the woman has to end up with the right guy at the end. You cannot write a book about a woman where she ends up alone. It doesn't sell. It's very, very difficult to do these other kinds of stories.
I heard you say in an interview once that the idea is that you didn't marry Mr. Big, you wanted to be Mr. Big.
Yes.
Why are we not seeing stories like that depicted? And I guess, like, we've kind of come to the conclusion that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and that we just like those heteronormative classic stories that are told again and again. But I don't know, I think there's a long way to go in the media space, and I think that there needs to be more female writers and more, like, I don't know, just more diversity in the way that we storytell, because even I'm noticing now, like, just small things, like really hot same-sex couple dynamics play out in small roles on television or in books, and you're like, yes, that's so good, because finally they're being shown in a way that's actually desirable and beautiful, and not just this random side story that is sort of like not ever the main character. I think we're definitely taking steps in the right direction, but it just sometimes is really frustrating. I find my own internal dialogue is exactly what you're saying. I find myself, as much as I want to step into my, like, yes, I'm an independent woman and I can be happy on my own and I don't need a man and blah, 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 I do find myself spiraling back to what I've been told in all the different stories I see everywhere. And it's just sometimes a bit frustrating, you know, you feel really empowered and then you find yourself feeling kind of like a little girl again, being molded by the stories we see everywhere.
It's like, I want to be a strong, independent woman, but I want the door held open for me. You want these things, but then you also want to lean into the feminine side of things. But it's interesting because I remember hearing, 50 Shades of Grey, a massive phenomenon. And I remember someone saying to me when that was like popping off, they were like, if that was, so Christian Grey, obviously, powerful, good-looking, rich man. They're like, if that was an ugly, poor man going after this woman and stalking her, he'd be classified as a stalker. And here we are romanticizing it.
So right.
Here we are romanticizing it, being like, oh my gosh, and he's got a private jet and he's in this ivory tower. And yet if it was flipped financially and looks-wise, everyone would be like, oh my God, absolute creep. It's so interesting though sitting here because I have to admit, when I watched Sex and the City, I did not think about any of this dynamic playing out at all.
Really?
It wasn't until we're researching this interview that I'm sitting there going, oh my goodness. I didn't even think about all the undertones and all the teachings and learnings and what it was saying to me as a woman. And I kind of feel like that I've been duped in terms of, like the propaganda that I must have been fed over the years. Not saying this is propaganda, but in terms of I don't see what I don't see. The Big and Carrie dynamic, I didn't even think, but subconsciously it would have played on me in terms of
I want to marry a rich man.
Yeah, but I didn't think about it like that because I've probably been showed it that dynamic so many times throughout my life. And each time I see that, it chips away a little bit without me even realizing.
I think with Sex and the City, it's the female friendship, which is a real reflection of real life in New York City, and in particular, my own life. Maybe because I have 2 younger sisters and didn't have any brothers, but I always had lots and lots of girlfriends. And New York City, it's one of the few places where women can actually come and be powerful. We do have powerful women here, like, Anna Wintour, Tina Brown. There have been women in fashion, historically, beauty, even in finance. It's a bit of a woman's city because it's one of the few places where women can make it. And there are also more women here than men. So if you're a woman here and you don't have female friends, it's very difficult. It's a place where women actually need each other in a lot of ways to survive. And those are realities of big city life. And that was one of the things that I wrote about in Sex and the City.
With the 4 characters in Sex and the City, there's also quite a difference between the characters. Say, Charlotte is very much about financial security, whereas Samantha's very much about self-made success when it comes to money. And what was your thought process behind that in representing, both sides?
The reality is that I had lots and lots of girlfriends, but most of them were like Samantha. That's the reality, is that women were pretty freewheeling. There was a lot of dating. In terms of the TV show, it's a pretty standard template of a TV show. Sex and the City. So I had lots and lots of girlfriends, but on TV, you can't have lots and lots of girlfriends. It gets whittled down to 4 characters, and then they make distinctions between those 4 characters. Part of it is also the actresses, as they learn the characters, as the seasons go on, they bring more to the characters. So it's kind of organic, free-flowing situation. And that's ideally what one wants with a TV series.
Do you relate mostly to being Samantha?
Well, Carrie's my alter ego.
It's just quite interesting because I know it's your alter ego, but I guess it's probably comes down to the fact that Carrie marries big. Like, I kind of imagine you were a Samantha because she's so independent and she's like, I don't need to be in a relationship. And if I do, maybe I'll date someone that's 21. She's such a...
And I'll lie there with sushi on my stomach.
Yeah.
I had a couple of friends who were like Samantha.
I want to be Samantha.
When I say that most of my friends were like Samantha, I mean that in terms of, people were pretty open to sexual experiences. The character of Charlotte was really a character that Darren Star came up with as a counterpoint to the other 3 characters.
He's the producer, for anyone that doesn't know. I found that out I must say, okay, I'm not sure how this is going to come across, Candace, so can you just bear with me in case I put my foot in my mouth? But, am I right in thinking you chose not to have children?
That's true. I've never wanted kids.
Was that a bit of a F you to the patriarchy? Was that I want to be able to focus on my career? Because as you say, 60s, 70s, 80s, not particularly progressive, very traditional. So it's I still am really grappling with do I want to be a mum, or do I want to be a mum because society's told me that that's what security,
what
financial
will
success.
fulfill you.
Exactly.
The reality is that 86% of women are mothers, whereas 62% of men are fathers. So there's a big gap there, number one. I think that, there's probably 10 or 11% out of that 86% of women who are mothers because it's what you're supposed to do as a woman. And being a mother makes you safe in the eyes of society. We always say, oh, she's a mother. If you're a mother, you can do anything for your kids. You can't do anything for yourself or your career. That's considered selfish. But you can do anything for your kids. Everybody understands that. So being a mother is the one kind of universal female experience, right? Since 86% of women are mothers.
That is
the guess
so
is that
high.
7% are not mothers because they couldn't have kids. So that kind of leaves
Oh my
7%
gosh.
of women who are saying, you know what? I don't want to have kids. I don't feel like I need to have kids. I mean, for me, it's definitely being an outlier not having kids. In a place like New York City, I know a lot of women who don't have kids. If I lived in the suburbs, if I had a different life, I imagine I probably would have had kids because that's what you do once you're in that pattern.
It's interesting, Soph, that you don't want to have children as, an FU to the patriarchy. Whereas I'm like, I want to have children and a career as an FU to the patriarchy.
But that's just doing 2 full-time jobs.
No, but I want to show that it's possible, and I want to change the narrative, for the generations after me.
Do you have any thoughts on that whole situation?
Having kids is a lot of tasks. You've got to take the kids to the doctors. You have to do all the school stuff, most of the cooking. I don't know. I mean, maybe I would have had kids if I was super, super, super rich and I could have had help. Who knows? But, that wasn't going to happen. It's very hard to have kids and have a big career. I mean, you can certainly have kids and have a job. And most people need to do both.
I think it's about choosing the right partner. I honestly think.
Really?
And then I think my children, and if I have sons and they see their father being involved in the childcare and around the house, that's going to instill a different view for them for when they get married and have children, or if they choose to marry and have children. So I just feel like it's the more that we don't play an active part in changing that narrative, the longer it's going to take that generational change.
But I also think there's a lot of, there's a huge wave of women starting to talk out openly about how, they regret being mums. It's quite fascinating, and there's a reason no one's ever said that before, because men need us to have kids. It's so interesting because on one side I fully understand your argument, but on the other side, when you hear there's a whole celibate revolution happening after what's happened with Trump. There's all these women being like, actually, fuck men in general. I'm not going to have sex. I'm not going to have kids. You think you can do it better? Cool, do it without us. And it's really interesting to see. I don't know where I sit with it. And I still think that I would like to be a mum and that it's not all ingrained societal stuff. But I think that it's incredibly hard to change the system. And unfortunately, right now, we're still very much in a system.
We are changing the system, though. That's what our whole business is on.
Yeah, I know.
As our mission is to try and create more equality through the financial empowerment side of things.
Yes, that's the most important aspect, I think. I love you for saying oh, I'm going to find this guy and he's going to stick with me and he's going to take care of the kids and he's going to be an example. Well, I got to tell you, your chances of finding that guy you probably have a better chance of being in the 1% than finding that guy. That's the part that you really can't control. You can't control another person. That's the issue. And, there are millions and millions of women out there who got married to a man who they thought was going to be there and do all of those things. And the guy doesn't, and I see there are a lot of women out there who say, don't get married and have kids unless you feel like you can take care of those kids on your own. Because, there's a good chance that guy's going to leave. The guy could lose his job. I've seen that happen a lot. For men out there making money and being the provider, or, that's also a cutthroat world that they're in as well. Not all these guys are that ambitious, etc. That's the issue. It's like you're relying on somebody else to do all kinds of things and tasks, etc., that you can't really control them.
I think for me, it's like you are both contributing to this child biologically in a heterosexual relationship. You should both be providing financially. You should both be providing on the daily tasks. You're a team. It's a household. I think it's as simple as that for me. And I want a partner that is willing to contribute as much as I'm contributing on all those levels.
And how's that going? Are you finding that guy? I mean, how old are you?
36. No, I do have a partner that is very in that camp. And he's probably going to listen to this podcast and go, oh, geez. Whew.
The bar's high. I changed my mind.
But no, yeah, it's taken me a while to find that person. I mean, now I'm just saying that I'm going to spend my life with this person and have kids with them. But I think it's more. It's just like I think that's why it took me so long.
It can work.
I think it's because honestly, I think that's why it took me so long. Is because it's like I do want that, and I'm not going to settle for anything less because my financial independence is important to me, but so is having children.
Look, there are people who they really want to have children. I feel like if you really want to have children, you want to have children and you have them.
I don't know. I think for me, I would be in the same camp as what you said. I think if I earn enough to be able to get help so that I can not compromise my career, and obviously there'll be a part compromise, there always would be, and there should be probably for both sides, but not just for me, then I would love to be a mother. But I can't. I know I couldn't handle financially, the tasks, emotionally, etc. by myself. So unless I was in a situation where I felt like it was super, super equal, as you say, in all those ways, I kind of love this new wave of like, you don't have to, because the biological clock's shit house.
Oh,
and like by the time you start earning good money is when your biological clock is like tick tock, tick tock. Yeah. So it's like, it's just so shit because you finally
here's a pay rise, tick.
Yeah. You better posh out a baby now. And then, it takes forever to get your financial situation back. And I just think the idea of having to rely on someone to pay for your life and your kid's life is so scary.
Yes, I think it's scary, and it's also very uncertain too.
I mean, the positive thing here is that Victoria has invested her money for a very, 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 very long time. So the reality is she could look after herself if she had kids and then they left. And I think that if we were all in that situation, we would all have the power to leave an unhealthy dynamic where someone isn't pulling their weight. But the unfortunate truth is that a lot of us didn't get financial education in time to be in a position by now where we could have our own back and our children's back should our partner not be able to provide or leave for whatever reason. And I think as we move forward with the curve and just like the general narrative around feminism and what it looks like to carve your own path, whether that's kids or no kids, is having the freedom of choice. And the only way that you have that is by having your own money.
Yes.
Well said.
Thank you.
That was,
I am 100% for women making their own money, having their own money. And, it's not just about having the freedom to leave. It's really about self-esteem and self-actualization,
yes,
as a person.
So
and
true.
This is something that we don't tell women. We only tell women, you're going to be fulfilled by being married and having a child. Well, there are certain times, if that were true, then believe me, men would not be out there making money. The reality is that making money and achieving is fulfilling in a way that can only be accomplished by doing those things, making money. I mean, a lot of, I don't know. I mean, I felt like a lot of my problems were solved when I started writing bestsellers and got $1 million contracts. Believe me, $1 million contract will solve a lot of your psychological problems. I promise you.
I love that.
Love that.
Because I hate when people say money doesn't bring you happiness. It's like there's definitely a certain level of money that brings happiness.
Yeah.
It's not, you don't need to be the filthiest, richest person in the whole world, but to be able to afford the basics and not have to ever worry about being able to afford something you need or doing things that you want to do, there's a certain level of psychological ease and like just nervous system relaxing when you have the money to do the things you want.
It brings you the freedom to spend your time how you want to. And if that's on things that bring you more happiness than working, then it definitely does bring you an element of happiness.
This is the coolest thing we've ever done, I think.
We have an app.
Can you believe it?
I know, quite cool.
If you told me that even 3 months ago, I'd be like, as if.
I feel like when you have an app, you're an actual business.
I know.
Yeah.
And we haven't really talked about this much. I don't know why, but the Investing Club, it's an app basically. So you can download it from whether you're
Apple and Google.
Yeah. You can watch all of the investing ideas, you can chat in the community, you can speak to Vic directly, all on the go. And the reason that we went down this path is just like we've had so many students go through our courses and stuff, but when you have to be sitting at your laptop, you can't do it on the go. It is kind of, I mean, everyone's busy.
And we can notify you when things in the stock market happen.
Yeah, we've got push notifications.
Yeah, so it's really, really great. We did one this morning. We do a little update, a stock market update every week. So you can be on the pulse wherever you are, going about your daily lives.
So
we got you.
Yeah. If you want to try, we've got a free trial for 7 days. And yeah, jump in and have a look around. Comment, talk to us, share your ideas. It's a really cool space. And yeah, we've got all of that. We've put a link in the podcast show notes so you can find out more. When you look back at your own financial choices and the way that you've lived your life, is there anything that you, I don't know, like your own personal relationship with money has evolved over time, or what you feel is enough and fulfilling has changed over time? Like Carrie, I know she's your alter ego and not, very, very, very true in the later seasons, but her attraction to like the shiny, nice things like beautiful shoes is kind of the opposite of the idea of what you probably should put your money in if you're trying to invest in being a financially secure place. Has that changed for you?
But, there are a couple of different aspects of that. Number one, in a place like New York City, so much of that is about fitting in. When you're in your 20s or 30s, like the right handbag or the right shoes, it's important and it gives you a sense of belonging. I promise you, when you're 65, that's the last thing that is going to make you feel like, you're an insider. But when you're young, people are much more hyper attuned to signals of belonging to certain groups. So that's really what that's about. It's young people in their 20s who go crazy, buying vintage handbags and clothes and labels. And when you get older, it's like that kind of stuff is less important because you're much more established in who you are and where you fit into the pecking order. But that's very important as, somebody who's young and you're competing and you're in the media business or, look at everybody on social media. The other problem is, not making enough money to feel like you can invest. If you're really living hand to mouth, you figure, hey, you know what? I'm going to splurge and I'm going to buy that pair of shoes because at least I'm going to feel good. It would be great if we all made a lot more money and made enough money to invest in the stock market. I happen to own like 2 properties. I own an apartment and I own a house in the Hamptons. both small, but still I own them. And, you know, that's probably the most important thing as a woman is to, you know, have your own real estate. You know, it's not a room with a view, it's an apartment with a view or a house with a view. So I think it's really, really important for women to invest in, I suppose, the stock market, which is pretty scary.
Not if you listen to the Curve podcast.
I was like, are you going to say it or am I?
Yes, but it's, you know, there are more and more women who are, you know, reaching out to other women. And I think that there's a comfort in that for women. It's like, if these women can invest in the stock market, I can too. So it's really about seeing more representation in financial areas.
Would you say then when you were younger, you spent money on frivolous shit, and as you've gotten older, you've invested in things that you realize are going to appreciate over time? Is that kind of how you've started to be with your money?
I've never been a huge consumer. I'm not 100% for consumerism. When I was a kid, you know, you had one or two good things that you had for your whole life. So that's really my attitude, is invest in those couple of really good pieces. But, you know, we live in a totally different time now. We live in a time of fast fashion, etc. So, and, you know, people are really pushed to buy all kinds of things that they don't necessarily need. That's the world that we live in.
No, I think it's very true, the whole instant gratification. But I've also never paired it with like fitting in as well. When you're that young and you're that impressionable, it is a function of, I want it now because I want to fit in. And it's how do you psychologically change that for a young person when if you invest now, the less you have to invest over your lifetime if you start earlier. But usually that's in a period of time when you don't have a lot of money, or your priorities are different because you want to fit in and you want to be friends with those people and you want the nice shiny things. And so as you get more comfortable in your own skin as well, and you get more self-confidence, you don't, as you get older, you don't have to spend money on those things. You've got less time, but you've got more money to invest. And it's just like the whole life cycle. Yeah.
I also think that it's about getting the message out to young women. Here's how you can save. Here's how you can invest. Here's how you can make money for you, which is something that men do. You know, men have all kinds of money systems in place. You know, the biggest one seems to be the pyramid scheme. But I've also noticed that, you know, one of the things that men do is when you have one man who makes money, you have all of these little satellite men who are taking a little bit of that guy's money. It's like the lawyers, the investors, the this, the that. I mean, men have created this whole financial structure where, you know, that they've denied those structures to women traditionally.
Because I think for a long time because we haven't been a part of the club, we don't know how to pass it on. But now that we're starting to learn about it, I think the most crucial part is that we talk to each other about it. And that's kind of what I love about Sex and the City, and the way that you've written so many of your novels is interweaving that, you know, female friendship and the importance of lifting each other up and really accepting where each other are at. And I think that when it comes to money, because there's been such a gap for so long, if you have a little bit of that information, sharing it and like talking to your friends, that's literally the best thing that we can do. Like, and we see that all the time with our podcast being shared around. You're like, oh, amazing, because it's wanting other women to succeed. It's wanting other women to have that same financial security that for so long has been amongst guys group chats, but not, you know, at cocktail night with the girls. But it shouldn't be so separated, because money and business is not masculine, and but we all see it in that way.
But I will say this, the older you get, the more important money is. And as somebody who's 65, money is the most important thing that you can have when you're older.
That is so interesting, because most people say time.
You know, everybody tries to tell you that it's something different. Money is the most important thing when you get to be older. It is, unfortunately, it's true. It buys you so many things. It allows you to do things. It's like the people who I see who are older, who are the happiest, are the people who have the most money. They're the ones who are still out. They're still having adventures. They're still doing things. You need money.
Do you think you would have done things differently had you had your time again, whether that be marrying someone and combining your finances, whether that be doubling down on your career, where, you have
better financial decisions.
Well, you have wisdom on your side. You can look back in retrospect and we can all learn from that. And so if there's anyone, I mean, we've got a huge range of like ages that listen to this podcast from 20 to 70. And we get reminded of it often from voice notes from 6-year-olds that are like, we love the podcast. So obviously this won't necessarily resonate with people who are maybe older than 50. But I guess for younger you, is there anything that you would wish you knew or would have done differently?
I would have thought a lot more about making money when I was in my 20s. And maybe I would have done something differently. Like when I was younger in my 20s, I thought like, oh, maybe I should try to write for TV. Well, I kind of sometimes wish that I had done that, but I had this idea in my head that I was going to be a novelist. I was going to win the Pulitzer Prize. Everybody was going to love me. And, it was this whole artistic ego. And for a really long time, until I was in my mid-30s, I barely made a living wage. I made enough money to get by as a freelance writer. It was a very precarious existence.
Do you think there's an element of you having such passion and drive in what you do that resulted in it being financially successful because you loved writing and you had a dream and you had a vision of I am going to be a writer? Because a lot of people would have given up. If you're living on barely a minimum wage, a lot of people would have given up and gone into something else that they maybe didn't make them as happy, but they could earn a better paycheck from.
That's true. And that's the one part that I don't think about. But I was very determined to succeed, really against all odds, because I didn't start writing Sex and the City until I was 34. So that was really a pretty long time. I'd been a writer professionally since I was 19. So that was 15 years. But you know what? In that time, you didn't have to make it right away. I mean, New York was full of creative, passionate people. In those days, you didn't have to be rich to have access to interesting people, interesting places. Now things have changed. I mean, now New York is a place that's full of private clubs that never existed before. It was really about like, are you a cool person? You will get invited to, the cool restaurant openings, etc. I mean, there were people who were like on the scene. And now, I mean, there's a club here that it's $250,000 to become a member. It's full.
You're in the Hamptons. Are you surrounded by really wealthy people? Is that like, I mean,
yes.
Sorry, I'm taking it from Gossip Girl, lol, which I watch all the time. But I thought the Hamptons was like quite glitzy. Do you find there's quite a stark contrast or that's like reinforced a lot because of the fact that you're there?
Well, the reality is that maybe there are like a couple of houses that are $2 million. The average house is $5 million. There are enormous houses out there, 10,000 square feet, bigger than that, because very, very rich people park their money in a big house. And, these houses are empty all winter. There's a huge income disparity that didn't exist 15 years ago. That's why I'm like, women, get the money.
Get the money.
Get the money.
Don't marry a rich man.
Forget about Mr. Big.
Yeah.
Get the money.
God, I love it so much. Forget about Mr. Big. Become Mr. Big. That is like what we're talking about.
Get the money.
Here.
Love it, love it, love it.
It's just so annoying how hard it is because honestly, I think that there's a lot to be said for, you know, we've been in this startup, you know, for 5 years, and it is pretty hard. You know, like business is hard. And there's a reason, I think, that people choose to marry someone instead.
Marry Mr. Big.
Well, it's easier to marry the Mr. Big, isn't it? It's much harder to try
you're
and be
assuming Mr.
Big.
Big is a nice guy. He could be an absolute a-hole.
True, that's true. Maybe
and then your whole life is going to be shit. Rather than just a few short years of tough work.
You know, I'm not saying I would have it differently. I'm obviously choosing that. Like, and even if I'm not financially successful, I still would be proud of not opting for an option that felt easier. I'm always going to opt for the hard option. My therapist is like, what's wrong with you? Stop going for the things that are difficult.
There's a nice path. Oh, no, but here's one through the mud and under the fence and through you're like, no, there's definitely days that I'm like, oh, you know what?
I'm just going to make a Hinge profile that's like, I'm looking for someone with $70,000 million.
Looking for a man in finance with a trust fund. Yep, definitely. Oh.
But I know I wouldn't be happy. I know it's not what I want. It's just that, like.
Well, you know what? That's a job. Being with a really, really rich man is a job.
No, you're right.
And some women are good at it, and some women can, you know, look the other way. But if you can't, you can't. I mean, I could never do it. The most sexist people in the world are rich men, because there hardly are any women in their world.
Yeah.
As we see in the 1%. So the women who are in their world are the wives and mothers. And these guys, the rich men who I know, they don't have a ton of respect for women. They don't, no matter what they say. It's a closed club, and it's very sexist.
So we should kind of feel sorry for them a bit, because, you know, they don't have any powerful women around them. So, you know, I kind of feel for them.
But also, like, the power that you feel and the confidence that you feel when you have the money in your own pocket, not in someone else's that you're trying to pull it out of, is incredible. And I think that then if you times that by a shitload, which is what the 1% have, can you imagine the power that they would feel, and particularly towards women? Like, I think you're right. They very much would still see women as second-class citizens, or their wives.
100%.
They would just feel so far up on their high horse that everyone else below is like.
I even remember when I was very little and having to ask my parents for pocket money and relying on my parents financially, even at such a young age, the minute I could go and get my own job. And I remember asking my parents, you know, at what age will people hire me? Like, and I was about 11. And they're probably like, no one yet, darling. But I went and did a paper round, and I had my own, and I earned like $3 a week. It was like nothing. But for me, it was the whole independence that came with it. It wasn't the dollar amount. It was, if I want to choose how I spend my money and live my life and, you know, make those decisions, I need to go and earn my own money. And so, yeah, I think from a very young age, I have never, I've wanted to get away from relying on someone as quickly as I can.
Can I just say, Candace, I just want to, on behalf of an entire generation, to say thank you, because it is really hard to be the tall poppy and to stick up out of the grass and do things differently. But even though it might seem like millions of years ago, and you're probably like, I'm actually kind of sick of talking about Sex and the City or my other work, but it really, like, that is reverberating, and it will for generations. So thank you for putting your words out there, because
taking one for the team.
I'm sitting here in a blazer being like, I've got a blazer on, and I'll sit here and be a businesswoman if I want. You know, like, you've really written that into society. And just wanted to say thank you, and thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us, because you are an inspiration to many.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. It's been so much fun talking to you. I could talk to you for another hour.
We won't do that to you, but we really appreciate it. And also we will definitely be using the Make money.
Money.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for listening to Raising the Curve. These conversations are designed to teach you everything you need to know to be better with your money, from saving to investing to talking with your friends about your salaries, all of that stuff.
And if you like what you heard, we would love if you could please hit subscribe wherever you're listening and leave a comment. Let us know what you thought about the episode.
And it only takes 1 second and it would really make our week, our month, our year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So please do it. Okay. Love you.
Bye.